guys, welcome to my stream. If you are new here, I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. If you're one of my Marshmallow Moaner gangs who's a regular, welcome back. Today's gonna be a little bit different from what I usually do with you guys, so just like relax, chill, and hang out, all that jazz. Let's see if my mic is working. Okay. And then if you are new here, or if you are a Marshmallow Moaner, you haven't tuned in for a while, I am going to just say I have disclaimer, I have pets, cats, and dogs. And so you guys hear any rustling, hustling, bustling, meowing, barking, that is my pets. They get free reign of the house, free range. They go wherever they please. I don't lock them up when I stream. So they just kind of hang out. Sometimes my cat will jump on here. So do not be scared. That has happened before. People have gotten scared and was like, what was that? It's just my animals. Other than that, I am doing a book review today. So today's going to be kind of like, not a long, super long stream. Like some of my streams are like 2 hours, the max. But today will probably be a little bit shorter, along like an hour to like maybe 30 to 45 minutes to an hour. But we're doing a book review. And we're just kind of chit-chatting and hanging out. So yeah, welcome. I'm gonna drink some water before we start. Oh my gosh, parched. All right, so the book I'm reviewing today, it is called The Scrolling Indigo Book and its Extraordinary Subjects. It's a long line to read, long title, but it is written by Mr. Hoo-Ha. That is the author's name, and the author basically is I'm going to read the little back here. It says, Mr. Hoo-Ha is a recovering workaholic. He enjoys people watching and judging their behavior. The simple things that tickle his fancy are black licorice, black oolong tea, coffee, and sleeping in dark corners away from the world's kerfuffle. During his spare time, he likes to bake a carrot cake with a glass of red wine while listening to oldies music. So this book is a Hmong book, not a Hmong book, but like Hmong Miao, right? Like, and it is like fiction, fantasy with like a lot of history sprinkled into it. And in the beginning, the author writes about how this is like a book. Like when he was a kid, he was looking for books that had representation, and there was none, right? And so this book is written for the people who are just like him, looking for books with representation of people who look like him, who are like him, that came a little too late for those kids, but just in time for us who are now adults. So it's a lot. It's a hefty book. It's like 600 some pages. The first few chapters are really long, but I'll give you guys a little bit of like, in my terms or like my words, like, what is it called? A synopsis. Right, so the book is about like a Hmong American girl named Leah, and Leah Hing, and it basically starts off when she's like a child, and she like embarks on like a magical, historical, spiritual, kind of like everything, journey. And this is like a Hmong girl that like a lot of us can relate to, especially Hmong Americans. She doesn't speak English. She doesn't really know not English. She doesn't speak Hmong. She doesn't speak any Hmong. She doesn't really know much about her like Hmong culture or history. She prefers to be called like Leah, like Leah, versus Leah, my Leah, right? I think it's Leah, but I don't know. I'm just assuming because you can say Leah a lot of different ways in Hmong. And I think there is a Hmong spelling in here in the very beginning, but, you know, I forgot it. And so she starts as a child. She lives in America. I think it's Rhode Island. It is Rhode Island. And she basically, like, embarks on a journey from, like, a very young age of, like, spiritual... Because, like, Hmong people are very spiritual, right? Like, if you're Hmong and you're watching this right now, like, you know, Hmong people are very spiritual. So it starts off really young. It's like the prelude, right? And then it jumps into like when she's already like a college student, and she basically embarks on this like coming of age. It reminds me a lot of like coming of age stories though, except she's a lot older, because like it has the same like story trope and like the same feel of like a coming of age story, right? Like she's going through something that's like challenging, and she's going through all these obstacles, like magical things are happening to her that are allowing her to grow as a person and question like the ways of the world. So it gives off the same trope as like a coming of age story. Yet there's also like this fantasy aspect to it. So it's like coming of age, magical. I don't want to say Harry Potter because it's not like Harry Potter, but like that's the first thing I thought of like when I think of magical kind of ordeal. It's very interesting. And the history in this book, like all the historical parts of the book, it's all accurate, right? So it's not like borrowing from history and like altering history, right? It's actually like real history just placed in a fictional storyline, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyways, if I was going to rate the book, honestly, I would give it an 8 out of 10. Only because I do feel like in the beginning of the book, I felt like a lot more things clicked for me, but towards the like last third of the book, right? The last third of the book, I started to feel like there was a lot of conversations that were being had, and maybe it just didn't click in my mind for me, but I feel like there's a lot of like dialogue happening that I didn't really understand like the importance of the dialogue to the story. But this book is a part of a series, so maybe that's why it's not clicking for me yet, because I'm like, why are we talking about this right now? And like there's a lot of dialogue that I kind of feel like it's just like kind of small talk. And to me, I'm kind of like at this point, because like in a lot of books that I read at this point, like the last third of the book, sorry, I just think I heard my dog bark or something. But the last third of the book in a lot of like books I read typically start to pick up really fast. And I felt like at the end of this book was kind of like, I'm kind of like, okay, there's a lot of dialogue and I don't really know where this dialogue is going. There's a lot of characters being introduced towards the end of the book. And because it's a series, maybe this is also why it doesn't click for me. But it just, I don't really know the importance of what these characters are. And they're being introduced very late in the book. And maybe I didn't pay attention, and maybe they were foreshadowed somewhere or something like that. But I kind of felt like a lot of these characters were being introduced like in a lump sum. And I'm kind of like, where is this going? And why do they matter? Like, why are there so many characters? What are they doing here? And I feel like because it's a series, I don't really know how they contribute to the book yet. Because they all like kind of, is this book based on shamanism? This book is based on like Hmong religion, yes. I wouldn't call it shamanism because by like actual like technical terms, our spiritual beliefs is actually animism. So yes, it's based on animism. Is it that the book felt cluttered and it's hard to comprehend? Oh, that is a good way to put it. Towards the end of the book, so I want to say like this much of the book, if I was to divide it, yeah, like this much of the book, towards the end, like this end of the book, it felt very like cluttered because there was like a lot of people being introduced all at once, and then there was like a lot of things happening. But it does tie in some earlier characters. So, for example, like, I don't want to give it off too much information in case anybody plans to read it. I don't want to spoil anything, but there are characters in the beginning that I thought, like, what is the importance of this character, right? But it brings it back, like, that character comes back at the very end. So maybe that's going to happen because it's a series. But for now, some of them I'm kind of like, which age group is the author trying to appeal to? Adults. So I would say like anyone, I think, right? I'm not quite sure what age they're trying to appeal to. I think anyone, like even like a very mature like person who has good like a mature teenager with good reading comprehension could read this book. But I think for sure it's really good for like young adults. So like early 20s, right? Like just out of high school to like even my age. I'm 33. So, oh my God, am I 33? Having life crisis. Anyways, so it's really good for like that age group. And especially really good. I loved the beginning of the book so much. I think the beginning of the book to me has more, I have more like of a connection to it only because like that's what I'm looking for, right? The beginning of the book has a lot of like it's really rich in history, and the way it's written in the beginning feels like I'm reading poetry. Like it feels, it's weird for me to say this, but it feels the way my grandma used to talk in Hmong, but written in English. I don't know how to explain it other than that. Like Hmong is meant to be spoken very poetically and like artistically and elegantly, and I felt like the beginning of the book gave me a lot of that, and I really 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 loved the first 2/3 of the book. It felt like I was connecting back truly to like my ancestors, to home. Like that's what it felt like. Because another aspect of this book, because it's magical, right? She time travels. So there's like a time traveling aspect, there's magic, there's spirituality, there's culture, there's history. It's a lot in one book, and so I think that's why at the end it starts to feel cluttered, because there's a lot going on. But in the beginning it's more like laying out the land, right? If that's how you think about it. Like, does that poetic writing style get lost throughout the book, or is it consistent? If it's poetic throughout, I would be interested. I have to think about this one. It's more consistent in the first 2/3, but it doesn't get lost, if that makes sense. So when the author, Mr. Hoo-ha, explains certain things, especially like cultural things in the book, it gets back to like that poetic writing. But when it's like Leah's day-to-day like mundane life, but I think they wrote it that way on purpose, because like Leah is the most boring character I've ever read, like the most boring main character I've ever read. So maybe the author wrote it so that her day-to-day life is boring and kind of mundane, and you're kind of just like, girl, what are you doing? Because that's how I always feel when I'm reading her life. I'm like, girl, what are you doing? Like, girl, go to school, like get it together. Like so maybe he wrote it like that on purpose. But then when it gets to moments of like Leah like being a part of something that's bigger than her, I don't want to give away too much, so it's hard to explain. Because like some of you guys who are watching me have read this book already, and I don't know if anyone's like watched me yet that has read the book, so you guys know. And then some of you guys are my regular followers who have never read the book, so I don't want to spoil it. And it's a review, it's not meant to be like a whole reading where you guys get the whole story. So I'm only reviewing, right? I'm not doing like a debate or like in-depth like deal today. And if anybody who has read the book want to bring up questions or ask me how I feel about certain things, they can. I just don't want to give away the whole story, right? Because if you're really truly interested in the book, you should just buy the book. I do think it's worth it. Like I said, out of a 10 rating from 1 through 10, I do give it an 8, only because I would give it a 10 out of 10. But the end feels very chaotic for me, so I do knock it down a few points for that, 2 points. But yeah, so the parts where the author describes cultural things, historical things throughout the book is consistent with the poetic writing style. Nonetheless, the writing is actually very good. Without spoiling it, is it an open-ended ending? Yes, it is. Yes. Because you're like, huh? What's gonna happen next? Like, that's kind of what happens. So, you're kind of like, oh, wow, what's gonna happen? Like, what is this about? And obviously it's a series, so it's meant to be written that way. right? Where there's no like answer yet, because I think it's a 10-part series, like a 10-book series. How many series are there total? There's 10 books. There's supposed to be 10 books in total of the series. So this is book 1 of 10. So that's why it's open-ended, because it's kind of like it closes well though. So it's not just like, what happened? Why did it just end like out of nowhere? It ends well, but then it leaves you being like, oh, what's gonna happen next? You know, that's kind of more of like how it ends, like what's gonna happen next, versus like it just ended out of nowhere. Like the book wraps up well. But yeah, the writing is good throughout. I'm gonna be so brutally honest. I don't like Twilight, so if you're a Twilight fan, I'm sorry. But this writing style is much more sophisticated. So that's why I said if a teenager read this book and they're a mature teenager with really good reading comprehension, this would be for them. This could work for them. This will work for them. But if they don't have good reading comprehension and or just like reading skills in general, this would be a hard read. Just because the vernacular, the word choices, the sentence structure, it is more... It's a little bit more, I don't want to say advanced. It's more eloquent, elegant. It almost feels a little colloquial, right? Colloquial. It's definitely not how like modern day Hmong Americans or like even Americans are speaking. Like it's not how Gen Z talks. We're not being like no cap, facts. You know, it's definitely written in a way that's a person who reads a lot of literature writes, if that makes sense. So I do really like the book. What's your favorite chapter and why? My favorite chapter, I've talked about this before too. Let me go back. It is chapter 3. Printer no copy. My favorite chapter is chapter 3, but like I said, the first 2/3 of the book I really liked. The ending got really chaotic for me because, like I said, the last third of the book got really chaotic because there's a lot of characters that were introduced. There was like Huna, Hubei, Wu Feng. Who was the other one that like had the cleft lip? Fei Ming, Jacques, Alice, Francois. Like there's a lot of characters being introduced. Whereas at the beginning, like you're kind of time traveling, so it's easy to keep track. And there's like literally just one main, like, you know, it's consistent with Granny Chi and with Leah, and then Gandu Li, I think that's what her name is, Gandu Li, her story. So like the very beginning, like chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, I really loved, but my favorite is chapter 3. It's a very long chapter. It is the longest chapter I've ever read in a book. I'm not going to lie. And I've read a lot of books. It's the longest chapter I've ever read in a book, at least of all the books I've read. But it is by far my favorite. It is by far my favorite, only because I said it earlier, I don't know if you missed the heebie-jeebies, but I liked it only because it reminded me of my grandma. It's written, not like the story itself, but the way it's written reminds me of the way my grandma would talk in Hmong. And it's very poetic. I once described this to someone, but like when you read like that type of literature where it's so poetic and beautiful, it feels like eating chocolate slowly, and you're just like savoring the chocolate in your mouth. Like that's what it feels like. So I really enjoyed that because it starts to get fast paced, right? After that, it starts to get a little bit more fast paced. So I really liked the type of writing where the author is describing things, the way that he's describing things in chapter 3. It feels like home. And I think he wrote that. Maybe he wrote that on purpose. But it felt like home to me. It felt like what I've been missing. Like a home that I do not know of, but I've been missing. And I don't want to spoil it too much for those of you like Dweeby Bazooka Blaster who possibly want to read it. I don't want to give away the whole story. But in chapter 3, she time travels and she kind of goes to like the beginning, right? the beginning of what I would call like, towards the beginning I should say, but near the beginning of like what I will call like, near the beginning of the formation of our like history and our culture and our people, if that makes sense, right? Because they reference, the author references like Chiyu and things like that, and it makes me feel like I'm finally connected to a home that I always wanted to know about, or a home that I knew I have, that like, I don't know, the calling in my heart, specifically me, I can't say for any other Hmong person, but for me the calling is so strong that I truly want to visit my ancestral homelands of China, because it's just like, it is our ancestral lands. It is where my thousands and hundreds of my ancestors have died and lived their lives and created a life and created culture, created art. And that chapter just really connected me to that part of me, that part of my history, my ancestors. Like, it's weird. It's, if you're Hmong and you're watching this, right, like, 嗰是Shane, 嗰個 Koshina, right? So like, it's like, 嗰啲都擺咗啦, like, 嗰個 Koshina, like, it's like, I miss a place I do not know, and the longing is so strong. It's almost like my ancestors are calling me home, and this chapter made me feel like I was brought home. So to answer your question, that was a very long answer, but heebie-jeebies, that's why I liked chapter 3 so much. It felt like I was called home, and it felt like home. Not just the story itself of chapter 3, but the writing. It felt like my ancestors are like, you are home, child. But at the end of the day, it's still like, I still feel that longing, obviously. Like, I really need to go home. But it fulfilled a really big part of that. And it made me feel seen and heard. And it made me remember the way my grandmother talks. Because nobody talks like that anymore, right? My mom and dad don't talk like that. They grew up in Laos. And so my dad, especially because he went to like Laotian schools, so he speaks like, he mixes a lot of like Laotian into his Hmong. My grandma spoke like she wrote poetry every day, like she's been a long time poet, and it just made me think of that. So long answer, but yeah. Other than that, can you elaborate on her time travels to the beginning and why this is important? Wow, Hmong Poppy. Also, welcome. I forgot to say welcome to everybody. Welcome to Bazooka Blaster, Hmong Poppy, and heebie-jeebies on joining me today. I hope you guys are doing well. The time travels to the beginning because the book is the author's way of like paying homage to our culture, you know. That's like the feel I get from it, especially from the foreword. And I can even read the foreword to you guys because it's not spoiling the story at all. And this is from the author himself. Someone like me had waited nearly 4 decades for characters, heroes, heroines, history, and a story that looked like me to grace the pages and mainstream screens. To the small child who went to a book fair and could not find a novel that represented them, I apologize for arriving too late. Wherever you are now, I hope this novel and its continuing series find you at a ripe age. And to those who had to switch tongues to help their family navigate this collective, colonized sphere and could never be fully fluent in one or the other while dabbling between many worlds, this is for you. It was not until 2018 that I began compiling the short stories and other literary expressions I have written as a hobby to escape life's harrowing, fast-paced society and uncertainty of careers that did not elevate me to my highest potential. And through the hammering of societal pressure and the unyielding pandemic, I have finally caved in to escape into my writing to create a world to help save me from a deprecating sadness, a deep yearning, best described with 2 words, the German word Fernweh, and the Welsh word, I might mess this up, Hirath, whatever. I can't say that. Like many others, I am a lifelong learner, and we are all beginners at one time or another. This literary work is our beginning together into the world of the Scrolling Indigo book and its extraordinary subjects. I once saw Bibi spin a ball on her finger. Till this day, the earth continues to spin. Hi, Trebok. How are you doing? I hope you're doing good. Thank you for joining my stream today. So yeah, the book is a homage. On the flyer on your book feed says the book is on Amazon. The Amazon page states it is horror fantasy. Is it scary? Okay, I'm gonna answer that in just a moment. I'm gonna not scare you. I'm gonna answer MoonBibii. So, I'm almost blessed when I see you stream. Thank you. You are too sweet. I'm always blessed when you join my stream. To answer your question, MoonBibii, the time travel is important because it is basically leading. It helps her build up the story to how Leah is important in this story, because she does come off very basic and very boring, but it helps her kind of connect her spirituality, because in a sense she's got a bigger role in all of this, right? She's got a bigger role in all of this, from what I'm getting, and so far she hasn't to me, I still don't feel like she's that cool, but she's got a bigger role in all of this, and the time travel really helps build the story. Like I said, it lays the land out for the story, like the foundation of the story. And the time traveling, the astral projecting, adds to why the things that are happening to her are happening. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. It's really hard. Where's my mouse? It's really hard for me to explain without giving out too much. But yeah, basically it lays out the foundation, and it also explains like certain things that are happening to her, because the past and the future are linked. And that's why she's time traveling, because what's happening to her in the future is because of what happened in the past, if that makes sense. And is the book scary? Okay, so maybe some people would think it's scary. I didn't get that scared, but only because like I'm a horror baby, so I love horror, and I don't know, I just don't get that scared easily. I'll get scared, like jump scares, right? Like in person, like if somebody just jumps out and scares me. But when I'm reading things like this, or when I see it, sometimes I'm like, whatever. So I think for some people who get scared easily, it is very scary. But if you're somebody who doesn't get scared that easily, the book is it's not bad. It's really interesting though, because there's a lot of like, because it's Hmong, right? It's Hmong through and through. This book is Hmong through and through 100%. So there's a lot of references to like certain things that like we heard growing up as kids, like about like monsters under the bed and things like that. So the description of those like beings, those spirits, the wandering spirits and stuff like that, are spot on, and they can be very creepy. But I grew up with my dad being a shaman, so I grew up with my dad telling me like all these things, so it didn't really surprise me, because I'm like, oh yeah, like my dad told me they look like that. So, but if you read it, it is kind of scary, especially the beginning. Some of those ghouls and spirits, I'm like, oh my gosh, like why did you have to put them right there? But I think if you like horror, it's right up your alley. Okay, Treybox says, I won't be typing much, going to put the stream on the TV while I clean. Stay beautiful. Wow, thank you, Treybox. I appreciate you. Okay, Dewey Bazooka Blaster, huge thing. What does this say? I have to like open up my window to see it a little bit better. Okay. You know, if the writer is writing from a Gen Z point of view, does the main chick find a sense of belonging within her culture? Personally, I feel like Hmong culture has been assimilated into white culture, so it's hard to find a form of true cultural connection within American society. Not sure if this makes sense. She wants to be connected. Would someone not Hmong understand this book or feel like they are reading about hobbits? They will. The author does a really, really good job at like explaining everything to you. So whenever they bring in a ghoul that has significance in the culture, they explain it to you, like why this matters. They explain rituals, why this ritual matters. They explain, because there's a lot of like Hmong like actual like writing in here, like the spelling of the names and some of the sentences, but they do a good job of translating it over and explaining it, so you would definitely understand it even if you're not Hmong. You don't have to be Hmong to read this book. Yeah, you don't have to be Hmong. They do a really good job of connecting the dots for you in that sense and explaining things to you. But answering Dweeb Bazooka Blaster, I have to read that again because that was a long one. Okay, so the sense of belonging. She wants to belong, right? Because there's a part of the book where she starts to feel angry at herself for not being able to speak the language. And in the beginning, she doesn't really care, right? Especially like as a child, she was kind of like, ew, I don't want to be known as Leah. I want to be known as Leah. And I think that's also very common in Gen Z, like Gen Alpha, even like Zillennials, right? Like the generation that's between Gen Z and Millennials. I think that's very, like, I see that in our Hmong community where they're kind of like, I don't really want to be Hmong, but I kind of want to be Hmong, but like I've been shamed for it, or like I don't know like anything, so I just feel stupid, so I just rather not know. But there is a sense like deep down that she wants to be connected. And I think this book does a really good job of connecting the two, because Leah has blonde hair and she wears green eye contacts. She doesn't speak the language. She is very much like what you would think of as a Hmong girl who basically doesn't want to be Hmong or doesn't really care to be seen as Hmong. And so you're right, like you said about being like Hmong culture being assimilated into white culture. It's very obvious with Leah, but there's like this deep sense, especially after everything she's going through, like she wants to be connected, and she is connected, and she will always be connected. And I think that's another huge thing about this book that I didn't realize until you brought that up, is that no matter where you go and what you look like, whether you speak the language or not, you will always be connected to home. You will always be connected to your ancestors. You through and through, you're Hmong, and you can never, like, regardless. Like, I think the book does a beautiful job at that. Because I always thought I wasn't Hmong enough too, but this book reminds me that, like, no matter what, like, my bloodline, my ancestors, like, I will always be Hmong, despite the types of cultural changes that have happened. I'm not Hmong and thought the story and culture was very interesting. I think the writing style can feel different than what you're used to. I definitely agree with that. Like I said, the first part of the book I really, really loved. The last third, I felt... It reminds me of another author that I read. Gosh, what is his name? I'm going to look it up right now. But I know the book. The last part of the book feels like the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, or the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I don't know who that author is, but that's what the ending of the book feels like, and what some of the book even feels like. It feels like the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, because sometimes it does get a little hard to read. So whoever that author is of the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, it reminds me of Mr. Hoo-Ha's book, because that book was also a hard read. And this one can be a hard read too. And especially for me, like I said, the dialogue at the end sometimes, like I was kind of like, I don't really know what's going on, why this dialogue is happening right now. There's a lot of talking, kind of just like about like basic things and like getting food and being like, what happened? So I was kind of like, wow, okay, like there's a lot of dialogue between people right now. Just kind of like almost like small talk. That's what it felt like to me. For some of those conversations, it felt like small talk. But yeah, it can be hard to read, but it's not impossible. So that's why I recommend it for people who do read a lot. It is not for your first time beginners. Like definitely, like I said, it is definitely not for like the young teenagers who are like 13, 14, unless they are advanced in reading comprehension and skills. But nonetheless, like now that I'm talking to you guys, I'm starting to realize a lot about the book that I didn't realize. So I think this conversation is good too, because like I said, I didn't realize what Dweeby Bazooka Blaster was saying. Like, yes, the culture has assimilated a lot into white American culture, but this book reminded me that no matter where you go in life, like you're always connected. Because that's Leah. She's not very connected. She doesn't know anything. She has absent parents. She's not talking to. She doesn't really go around family, right? She doesn't really care for all of that. Like, the gist I get from her, like what I get from Leah as a character is like she cares about what she looks like. She cares about looking good a lot. She's kind of bougie, right? Because then she breaks up with, like, this is, I'll give you guys a little spoiler. She breaks up with her boyfriend because he just like did not, like, his aesthetics didn't fit her like lifestyle, like what she wanted to portray, or what's the word called, portray, or like the type of like like the vibes that she wanted to give out. Her ex-boyfriend was just not giving the vibes, and so she was like, bye. But at the same time, it's very common, like she doesn't know what she wants to do in school. She doesn't even know why she's in school, because that's like one of the first chapter. That's the first chapter. And even throughout the whole book, she's kind of like, what's happening? Who's this? What's going on? Like, the whole book, I felt like that's her personality, where she's like, oh my god, what's going on? What are we doing? And, but at the end of the day, like, she was still chosen to have this experience, to have this connection. And so, yeah, that's, like, one thing I didn't realize was the connection, that no matter what, like, that's what this book is too, like, to, like, not realizing it, like, no matter what. Because I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot even from I do hair, right? So I have clients who are mixed, who are half Hmong and half, something else. And they always say, I feel like I'm not Hmong enough. Like, I don't think I'm Hmong because my dad is white, or my mom is black, or my dad is Hispanic. Like, I just don't feel Hmong. I don't speak the language. I don't know enough about it, so I can't claim a heritage that's not mine. But this book is very good at that, like, talking about that. And, like, or not even talking about it, but just, like, through the storytelling makes you feel that way. That's, like, oh, yeah, like, despite the experiences and the different things that we've gone through in life, like, in, like, especially the experience of Hmong Americans, or just the Hmong diaspora in general, like, through and through, you're still Hmong. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts? Like I said, the book is very good. It is on Amazon. Rhea, did you buy the book? Yeah, the book is very good. Poppy, I do recommend it. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. Some of you guys might like it more, especially if you're someone who likes fantasy with a sprinkle of horror, a sprinkle of history. I mean, it is fiction. It's fiction, fantasy, horror, and everything in there. I think this will be for you, right? And it's almost kind of like I said, it's like it gives me the story trope of like coming of age, but also like, especially towards the end, it's like me and my friends are going on an adventure. That's like what it gives me. Who's your favorite character? Okay, it's gonna be funny because it's not even like a character, but I like I think it is like in Hmong Kaya or Kai, but it's like Gai. I love that little like chicken spirit. It's so cute. It just is so cute. But like every time I like watch anything or read a book on anything, those like little like kind of like side animal spirit characters are always my favorite, just because they're just like adorable. So yeah, though that's my favorite. Gaga is my favorite because it's just so cute. As far as like a person, I would say I like Granny Chi. I feel like that could be like my mom. I don't know, like she gives me like my mom vibes because my mom, her personality is very similar to that. So she's giving me like my mom vibes, and I adore my mom, and she's like a hero in my life. So I love Granny Chi as far as like a person goes. But my favorite character is Guy because he's just so cute. And like especially like the part where like Leah goes over to Granny Cheese and like gets introduced to them, and Granny Cheese, like, I don't want to ruin the story, but there's a part where basically Granny Cheese like, oh yeah, like that's fine, they do that all the time, those stupid things, and I'm like, oh my god, but also so cute and stupid, like stupid in a very cute, affectionate, like endearing way. So if the author came out with like plushie and merch, and they had like a guy merch like plushie, 100% I would buy it. It's like this little guy, like it's so little on the cover. It's like this tiny little poof. It's just like a little poof of like it's like a chicken spirit deal. It is the cutest thing to me in the book. So I love stuff like that, but I love like cute stuff. So yeah, I recommend the book. It is on Amazon, you guys. I have to go get the link just in a minute here, which I'm going to post at the end of my stream. But yeah, it is on Amazon. I adore it. You can get paperback or hardcover. Okay, so my stream just like cut because of my internet, which happens all the time. But I'm actually, I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm putting up the link right now, and I'm gonna pin it. It's a very long link. I don't know why that link is so long. Let me like not do that and like delete this. Okay, let me like actually do this. I don't know why I did that. There you go. I'll pin the link here. I don't know why I did that earlier. Okay, I'll pin it. So if you want it, the Amazon link is pinned on here, so you can like go buy it. You can get hardcover and paperback on here. And I'm so sorry, like I said, my my stream ended because of my bad internet. I'm sorry, everybody. So, but usually that means it's time for me to go because my internet will probably crash like 2 more times. I always have technical difficulties when streaming every now and then. It's your style, so don't be sorry. True. Anybody who's a regular that has watched me stream for like the last 2 months will know that my internet's always dying. But if you're a reader, you like literature, and you like this kind of genre, like I said, a little bit of horror, historical, fiction, magical thing, you guys will like it. And like I said, I think people who like adventure and like that type of like book, like coming of age and adventure together, you guys will like this. Because like I said, towards the end of the book, you get the feel of like, you know those like animes where everybody's like going on adventure to like beat the bad guy, and there's like, with the power of love and friendship, like that's kind of the vibes I get towards the end of the book. Because like even though like it's not like stated that they're like banding together, you start to get that feel because they like keep running into each other, and like they're all like kind of like, at least the ones that are like banding together are kind of like have the same goal, if that makes sense. So it is a really good book. I do recommend it. It's just at the end felt chaotic because there's just so many characters introduced. But yeah, my favorite character is Guy, and I would say Granny Chi, because Granny Chi reminds me of my mom a lot. Hi Jay Chang, how are you? You came at the very end of my stream. I just like disconnected for a little bit because my internet went down, you know, like as always is. How does the book end? So at the very end of the book, like I said, it gets very chaotic. Everybody gets introduced. There's a lot of people that get introduced. But I read it during kind of a chaotic time in my life too. But at the end, okay, because there's two French dudes. I think there's Jacques and there's Francois. And damn, I just got home. Damn, it'd be like that. And I think Leah's life kind of starts to go back to normal towards the end of the book. And if I remember correctly, she gets a letter, a gift box, a letter. And oh, I forgot to say that too. Silver jewelry and jewelry in general is also very important in this book. So it's mentioned at the very beginning of the book, and it's mentioned again at the very end of the book. And I think there's definitely a reason for it, because the beginning of the book, when like the prelude, she receives silver jewelry. Like, I don't want to say too much. And at the end of the book, she receives it again, and like is left with a note that says like, "Yo, girl, I heard you like silver jewelry and shit." Like, I don't want to ruin it because I don't want to like say it word for word, because like if you're gonna read the book, I don't want to ruin it for you guys. But they go through like a whole ordeal, because the book ending is kind of like long, right? So I don't want to like ruin it, but they go to an exhibit and stuff happens. Leah kind of gets pulled into like another dimension ordeal, right? And a bunch of stuff happens, magical beings, magical things, and then another character from the beginning kind of gets like pulled back. And I think that also, like, that experience in Leah's life transformed her, because I think after that experience of that like first experience with that one character, she starts to realize that like she wants to be able to speak the language. Like, something inside of her changes after that experience. And then so towards the end, when she gets pulled into this like other dimension, I don't want to say too much, but she gets pulled into this other dimension. She's like, "Is that you? Like, or is that you like calling for this person?" Like, and stuff like that. And then she meets like these other beings, and like I said, a lot of stuff happens because there's a lot of characters and magical things. There's guards, spirit guards. They're all kind of like fighting like pew pew pew, right? Like I said, I don't want to say too much if you plan to read the book, but they're fighting pew pew pew. And then like they finish that, and also there's a lot of death in this book. So every time there's like a pew pew pew, like someone gets hurt, always. And then so Leah's life kind of goes back to normal. At the very end, she gets like this delivery, and to me, I didn't realize it until now that I'm speaking again, because I just remember that the note said, "I heard you like jewelry, girl," and it reminded me of like at the beginning of her getting like silver jewelry. And also the butterfly pops up too. There's just too much. There's a lot. That's okay. There's a lot of little things that are popped in there. So if you know anything about Hmong history or culture and like the significance of like the symbolism of certain things, because like in the beginning there's a butterfly and at the end there's a butterfly, because the butterfly has significance in our culture, and so I just realized that too. Because like when I was reading the book, it was kind of hard for me to read, because I was kind of like, what is happening right now? That was kind of my thought the whole book, though. I'm like, what is happening right now? Every time I was like, what is happening right now? What is going on? Like, I feel like I'm Leah too, like at this point where I'm like, because throughout the whole book she's kind of like, what is going on? What is going on? And like, because then she meets like Huna and all these people who are like cooler than her in a sense, and they're just kind of like, girl, get it together. Like, why are you so stupid? Right? In a sense. They say it much more eloquently in the book. But, yeah, there's silver and a butterfly in the beginning, and there's silver and a butterfly at the end. And, like I said, it ends well because it ends with a gift box. But then you're kind of like, what else is going to happen to Leah? So it doesn't just end where, like, and Leah came out of the portal, and then end. Like, because they could have ended it that way, where like she just came out of the portal, end story. But then they end up that they wrap that up, that part of the story up. The author wraps up that part of the story of like the other realm and things like that. Leah goes back to her like normal life, kind of. I mean, she's not gonna be normal after all the things that just happened to her, but like she's trying to like resume normal life, and then like she gets the gift box, and you're kind of like, dun dun dun, what happens? So because it's a series, the author does a good job of like, and now what, versus just being like, this is the end, and nothing gets resolved in this book, because even though it's a series, it's still a book on its own. So the author does a good job of like wrapping up the end of the book. I just don't really like how chaotic the end of the book felt. So those are my thoughts on the end of the book. I don't like how chaotic it was, because it was very chaotic. It was chaotic and not, because like the very end of the book, like the last 2 chapters, because she meets like I said, like beings, right? The last 2 chapters are fast, like really fast paced, but leading up to that, like kind of like the part where Granny Chi and her and Huna and I think Wu Bei or Wu, too many names, they go to like the exhibit. I kind of like was kind of like, what's going on? They go Wu Fang. They go get food, and I'm just kind of like, okay, like they're just kind of talking. Granny Chi is just kind of like, I'm like, but see, that's also another thing. I don't really get those, why the author like placed those, because like the author, like everything else is very like, there's a reason, right? But some of those like placed conversations are just kind of like like casual conversation to me. I'm kind of like, okay, like why is there so much dialogue right now? Because like in some books, especially like towards the end, right, it starts to pick up where there's less and less dialogue, and in this part of the book there's a lot of dialogue. Even when Leah goes into the other realm, there's a lot of dialogue. That dialogue I do understand, but like leading up to it, especially like once like Huna and Wu Fang and Fei Ming, like all of them were introduced, I was kind of like, gosh, they're just kind of like hanging out at this point. Like, what's going on? So I do feel like that part leading up to the end of where like she goes to the other realm could have been faster. But that's just me. I just got bored at that part. But once she got into the part where she goes to the other realm and she meets Gaonong in them, that part is more interesting. But I think that's like second to last, where she meets like Gaonong in them. Okay, it says, are the dialogues in English? The dialogues that I'm talking about that are like the small talk dialogue that I kind of was like, this is kind of boring to me, yes, those are in English. The dialogues in Hmong and I think Yunanese, Chinese, are more interesting, but harder for me to read the Yunanese one. The Yunanese Chinese one, I had to kind of skip over that dialogue and read the English, because like the author does a good job like putting like the English translation down. And I really love that he put like the importance of putting our Hmong language into the book. But the Yunanese Chinese or Yunanese Hmong dialect in the book was really hard for me to read. I tried, I couldn't really read it. So I just kind of gave up a little bit and went to go read the English translation. But when she meets Gaonong and all of that in the other realm, there's a lot more Hmong dialogue again, but it's the English dialogues that like, and like I said, it's her mundane everyday to day life that like kind of bored me. It's a 10 series book. I'm sure there's a build up to get to the max. I'm sure the author has a purpose. The ending got chaotic, possibly putting your mind as a reader to feed onto the second series. That's actually a really good way to look at it. So I think that might be, I mean, like, you're right? It's a 10 book series, so I'm sure there's like way more to come. Yeah. Because even like right now, because like I understand like Granny Chi's like climax. I understand like Granny Chi's role a little bit more, but I don't really understand like Huna's, even Feng Ming. Feng Ming was one that I was kind of like, what is this character doing in here? Because like he shows up, he leaves, he shows up, and kind of like, because he disappears and he shows up, and I'm kind of like, what are you doing here? But there's a lot of character, because there's even characters in the beginning of the book that kind of like get like so, but those you kind of understand. But like a lot of the characters later on in the book, like maybe I just didn't pay attention enough, because like I said, maybe the author foreshadowed and I just didn't pay attention, because I wasn't reading it from an analytical viewpoint. I was reading it to just like read the story, right? If you're reading it from an analytical viewpoint, there's a lot in this book. It's like jam-packed with like symbolism and just like so much. Because like even now that I'm rethinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there was a butterfly at the very end of the book. Not the very end, but like second to last chapter, there's a butterfly. And there's a butterfly in the beginning. And I didn't catch that until just now that we're talking about it. And I didn't catch the silver jewelry, and I don't want to say what the silver jewelry is until I read, I'm talking to you guys too, where I was like, oh my gosh, it started off with the butterfly, and it started off with the silver necklace, and it ended with that as well. And I didn't catch that. So maybe sometimes, you know, it's kind of like when you're in English class and you have to like, you almost have to like debate about the book, right? When you're done reading a chapter and you do that in class and then you realize things. That's kind of what's happening for me right now. But yeah, especially with like the side characters, I'm kind of like, what are you doing here? Are you guys gonna be besties or not? Especially like with Huna and Leah, I'm like, are you guys gonna be besties or not? Because like you guys could totally be besties. Clearly you don't want to be. So yeah, I think the book is a good read. I think you should give it a chance if you have not read it yet. Mongchu Poppy, you sound interested. Who is the scariest character since the novel is supposedly horror? That's a good one. Yeah, Mongchu Poppy, you sound like you're interested. You should probably read the book. Heebie-jeebies, who is the scariest character? Honestly, it would have to be the one where Granny Chi, it's about her life, right? And it goes back into like her past. And she's being haunted. And there's a ghoul, I think it's like a danzong, that is like under her bed. Only because growing up as a kid, my mom and dad used to like freak me out with the story of Sakata, right? Like I don't even know where that story began, but like it reminds me of Sakata, which is kind of like the equivalent of like a boogeyman, right? Because my mom always told me, if you don't go to bed, Sakata is gonna come get you. Like he lives under your bed and he's gonna like come and grab you by your feet and pull you under the bed into another realm, like a demon realm, and you're never gonna see your mom and dad again, which is like such a horrifying story to tell your kids. But Poppy, shh. But that's what my parents used to tell me to go to bed, was like, you better go to bed or Sakatsa is gonna get you, because he lives, like Katsa is like under your bed, right? So I don't know why his name was Sa, but it's basically like a Hmong name. Like Sa, Katsa, it's like a rhyme, right? Like Sa, who lives under your bed, right? Who is like a spirit who lives under your bed. And if you don't sleep, all the naughty little kids who don't go to sleep, he comes out and crawls out. Not even just like comes out, it's like, hello, sir. No, he crawls out and like grabs you by your feet, by your ankle, and pulls you into like the underworld. And you'll never see your parents again. So that was the scariest one for me. I think it was a danzong, if I remember properly. Because there's like bunzong in there, there's danzong, there's like so many different spirits and like wandering spirits and things that show up in the book. But that one freaked me out only because it reminded me of that story. And like that was the only thing that used to scare me. Because like I was really attached to my mom as a kid. So the idea of never seeing my mom again and being pulled into the underworld. Wow, was this during Granny Chi's childhood? Is that present? Yeah, this was during Granny Chi's childhood, and because then there was like she was like being haunted, and like there was like the spirit like would climb on top of her and like suck her energy in a sense. It seemed like, and like would then when people came into the room, the spirit would go like underneath the bed. Poppy, shh. And so it just reminded me of that because, like, once again, what kind of crazy stories did our parents used to tell us? Like, that was terrifying. Like I said, when I was a kid, I was really attached to my mom. So the idea of like being pulled into the underworld and never seeing my parents again freaked me out. And that character or that ghost bitch, like I tell my kids or my nieces and nephews, you should do a story time where you read a chapter of the book. I should probably do that chapter because that one was pretty creepy. And the beginning of the book was pretty creepy where like there's like spirits coming down the street. That one was pretty creepy. But that one, yeah, that reminds me of that because, and like they always have stories, like Hmong people always have stories of like ghosts like under your bed reaching for you. And Hmong people always have stories of like, I don't know, ghosts are always, spirits always reaching for you. Because even my dad's stories are like, yeah, then like you'll feel a hand like reaching and touching your hair. I'm like, ugh. But you know, like, I don't want to say in Hmong because for some reason in Hmong it's like way creepier and scarier. Like that one time when I was doing spooky gaming with you guys and we were talking about spooky stories. Poppy! Yeah, that freaked me out too when I said it in Hmong. So I don't want to say anything in Hmong. Freddy Krueger in the 70s, Rhea, crazy. Did Shor Ning make it into the book Laugh Out Loud? Maybe they did. I didn't get any references. But like I said, I didn't get a lot of references until now that I'm talking to you guys. Because I kind of just like read it. And honestly, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I know a little bit about Hmong history and like Hmong symbolism and like spirituality to get me through like a decent casual conversation. But I don't know enough where I can catch certain things. And I don't know who Shor Ning is. So, like, I know, like, Shor and Jay, but that's like a 90s book or a 90s movie. Are we, like, I don't know. Sleep paralysis. You should do story time. Okay, I read that. That's, like, being, like, something that actually happened with the sleeping death is so creepy. Freddy Krueger in the 70s. Yeah, I forgot about that. Now that you said that, there's also a reference to, like, because Freddy Krueger was, like, a movie that was based off of actually all these Hmong men that were dying in their sleep, and they were, like, putting it off as, like, sleep paralysis, which is actually a real thing, you guys. It's in the news. It made headlines. It's a real factual thing, right? Like, these Hmong men were, like, passing away. And, that part also made me really sad because it has to do with sisters. Now that I'm talking about the book, there's just like so much in this book because I totally forgot about that too. But the sister rivalry in that part of the story makes me think about how sometimes by no fault to anyone really, it's just kind of happens by default, I feel like, because I don't want to blame anyone because it happened with my sisters too, right? And it's like sibling rivalry, like sister rivalry that you don't even realize. Like it's almost like the culture pits like girls against each other, you know, patriarchy. And that part of the book that like relates to like the sleep paralysis and all the deaths that happened during that time. Because Granny Chi's story happens in the 70s, which is around the time like those, anyways, it's referenced in the book. It's a real thing. Like the sister rivalry and like the fact that one sister is like, I don't like you, but the other sister is completely oblivious to it. It's like a real thing. Like it happens. And like I said, it's like the patriarchy. Like no fault to like anyone. Because in that part of the book, like her mom tried her best for both girls, but that one was actually really tragic and it made me really sad. Because the entire time the author, because this book is just jam-packed. Oh my gosh, I keep saying that, but it really is jam-packed. The entire time of that story, that part of the book, you think it is just like it just happened, right? Because like this part of the story is about Granny Chi, who basically becomes like a teacher, a mentor to Leah, right? For her like spiritual abilities. It's her like life story. So she kind of goes through like spiritual things too. So like the story takes part of the story's Ganeshi's life in the 70s anyways, and the author writes it so that the whole time you think it's just happening because Granny Chi is developing spiritual abilities until the very end, and then it references the Freddy Krueger thing, the whole sleeping paralysis, the deaths that actually happened that made headlines, and that Hollywood, you know, profited off of actually to make Freddy Krueger. And it's just a sad, tragic story, to be honest. Like, it didn't have to be that way. But when I read that part, I was really sad, only because it reminds me of my sisters and many other Hmong women my age and before me and after me will feel that type of love or lack of love. Like I said, it's hard for me to say much because if I say too much, I'll give away that part of the story. Insidious vibes. Yes, it also has a lot of astral projection in the book. So yeah, for sure, Insidious vibes. Like, because I think Insidious is all about astral projecting. So in this book, she astral projects. She goes into trances. She goes into maybe I could say it because like it's a part of the description. She goes into like Dream's Edge, right? Which is kind of like, to me, like the land between like reality and the Hmong people always say it like, I don't know the word for it, but my dad talks about it because my dad's a shaman, and it's like it's not date because date is like hell, right? So it's like he explains it as like levels. I don't know the Hmong word for it, you guys. I wish I did, because as for him, he talks about levels of like this kind of like other realm that you go into, right? And so she's able to go into these realms in a sense. But my dad talks about it, right? So she astral projects, she time travels, she has trances, she's able to go into these realms. So yeah, it gives Insidious vibes, but better than Insidious vibes, because Insidious vibes is just like astral projection into like, I don't know. That movie need to end. That movie franchise needs to stop, because I just watched the recent one and it's not that good. If this book ever became a movie, it'd be really interesting. It would have to be cut short a lot unless they decided to make it a series like Insidious. But honestly, I don't know who could ever make this. Like, I don't know who could make this or do this justice in Hollywood. It would have to be like an indie film, right? Where the author is like overseeing everything. But if, like, for example, like someone from Hollywood read the book and was like, I want to adapt it into a film, it could go wrong. It's like when they try to do Avatar, The Last Airbender, that first one, with like Shyamalan, whatever. It's like that. Like, they could take it and make it really bad. But if this did become a movie, I think it would be really, really good. It would have to be, a lot of it would have to be cut out, or it would have to be a series like Harry Potter or something, where they made all like 7 books. But it is really good. Like I said, Gaga is my favorite, but like I said, I like kind of like those cute little like silly like side characters, like in like Spirited Away. I love like the sprites. Howl's Moving Castle, I love Calcifer, so like for me that was always my favorite little character. So like I said, if the author ever comes out with like merchandise and like makes like plushies, I would love a Guy plushie. The characters sound very diverse. Yes, they're very diverse, and the personalities of each one are very different. Oh, my dog. Poppy! Yeah, so the characters' personalities are very different. Their backgrounds are way different. Everyone's background is completely different. Like ethnic, cultural, and even nationality is very different. Are there different kinds of Hmong? Yes, because then in the very beginning you're hit with it right away, right? So Leah, I think is Hmong Do, Hmong American, but she doesn't speak it, right? I think Granny Chi is green. She speaks green, if I'm correct, if I'm remembering this. And then she goes on to meet people who are like Yunnanese Hmong, like Chinese, like you would say Hmong Shuo, right? So like Hmong Shuo. And then you go on to meet like the Frenchmen, and you go on to meet like Huna and them, which I don't really know if they're Hmong. Like I don't get the idea of they're Hmong. But because then they speak in Mandarin a lot. There's parts of them speaking in Mandarin, so I don't know if they're Hmong and Mandarin speaker or they're like actually Chinese, like Mandarin speaking like Chinese. Like I mean, it's hard to say because Hmong people are considered Chinese too in a sense, but like you know what I mean, like not Hmong Chinese or like you know, where are her parents in this story? Completely absent. They show up here and there, but in the very beginning of the book, it's explained. Her dad is a doctor and isn't home often. He works late nights all the time. And her mom is like always traveling because she works in textile. And so she's just always gone. They're always gone. If anything, you see more of her dad. But everything happens really fast. Even though the chapters are really long. That's also one thing that trips me up. Like the first few chapters are like all within like a night span, but like the chapters are like this long, you know, but it's like within a night span because like she's, once again, you guys have to remember, she's going into different realms. She's going into like a trance, like a dream trance, sleep trance. She's astral projecting in her sleep. She's time traveling in her sleep, in her trances. So it's almost like this all happens in like a one night span. So like she'll go back home and her parents just like, her dad doesn't even know that she's gone because her dad like doesn't even come home. Her mom's like on a trip. So they're very absent, and it's like known that she's there very absent because like in the beginning she talks to the author talks about like how like she's always home alone and she's just kind of used to it. But like she misses, because she has a sibling, she misses her sibling sometimes, things like that. But yeah, it's made known that like her family's just not really around her. Like her parents just really aren't around her, which also just made me realize that maybe has contributed to her not being as connected to her identity. And that reminds me of my own family, because I have family members who have been very adamant about not teaching their children Hmong and not teaching their children anything about their culture or heritage. Do they play any aspect in the main chick story or character development, or do you think the author will incorporate them more as the series goes on? Because I feel like the relationship Gen Z Hmong kids share with their parents in regards to culture identity is not as addressed. I think the lack of the relationship that she has with her parents is what is addressing it. Because like I was saying, the fact that her parents are absent and that they're just kind of like, take care of yourself, Leah, figure it out, whatever, is part of the reason that they have this like identity clash and identity like sense of loss, or loss of a sense of like of a loss of identity. Because like I said, in my own family, I have relatives who have just been like, I don't need to teach my kids Hmong, and I don't need to, like, literally have deliberately chosen to not teach their kids Hmong. Like, they don't feel the need for it. They're like, we live in America. Why do they need to speak Hmong for? And I have family members who have been like, why do they need to know about Hmong culture when it's not going to be of use to them, so they don't need to learn it? And, like, I know people in my family who have been, like, very vocal about being like, my kids are not going to learn about the culture because it will never be of use to them. and just kind of like, well, I'm also not going to teach you how to live your life either, because I'm going to do my own thing, and like I'm going to give you an iPad, and this iPad is going to raise you. And like some of these kids have been raised on iPads and like PBS shows since they were like 3. So I think the lack of them not being in her life does address that loss of cultural identity. I don't know if the author is going to incorporate them more. Does Leah learn Zhmong? Huh? Zhmong? What do you mean Zhmong? In the book. Yes. So I made a comment earlier about how she goes through this experience and she condemns herself for not being able to speak the language or understand it because something pretty traumatic happens where her lack of understanding of the language like kind of sets her back, right? And after that she's determined to go learn the language. So she joins like a Hmong language class, and she stays in the class. She like, I think that part of the book was a turning point for her character, for her personality, for her, it's character development, right? Because it really broke her. Like it really broke her, and she is now determined to learn the language. And she has a really carefree free spirit too, where she's just like, ugh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, whatever. She reminds me of my niece, to be honest, where she's like, ugh, do I have to do it? But then she'll still go. And she'll doubt herself, but she'll still go and like try. So yeah, in the book, that event changes her, and she goes, and she does learn Hmong. But yeah, I do feel like I'm not sure if the parents are going to incorporate them more into the book. But I think one thing I get from the book too is that sometimes if your parents aren't willing or not going to teach you, there's a whole world out there of learning and teaching. Like there's mentors everywhere in every aspect of your life, and she meets so many people who are willing to guide her and teach her and show her that, yeah, it does take a village to raise a child, to teach a child, and she's like meeting her village, if that makes sense. So yeah, with Gen Z and the relationship to their parents, like I think that's something too that eventually sometimes you have to look outside of your parents. Because that's kind of what happened with my family too, right? Like some of these kids have been like, I want to learn more about Hmong people, and have started to look at outside sources. And that's just like in my family. So this is like my personal experience, right? You guys, I can't speak for all Hmong families, but in my personal experience, some of these kids are looking at outside sources, which sometimes you have to be careful, kids, be careful at the sources, right? We all learn how to look at sources, proper sources, right? I hope you guys remember proper sources and looking at legit sources when we're all like learning how to write essays. I hope you guys remember. But yeah, I think people, if they really want to, they'll find it. And I think this book alludes to that too, because all the interactions she's had, at least with her dad, that I read in the book, are very like, it's in passing. He's like coming home from work, or she's coming home from work, or she's coming home from somewhere, or he's going to bed. Like it's in passing, like moments in passing, which I feel like is, honestly, like I don't want to say and call out anybody, but I feel like it's very like I see that in some of my family members where it's just in passing. So does anybody have any other questions about this book? Just because, like I said, now that I'm talking about it, I'm realizing how jam-packed this book is, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot in here that I'm now only catching because I'm talking about it that I didn't catch. And I'm gonna give it up to Baby Bazooka Blaster for all like the really deep questions about cultural identity and Gen Z, because you've been asking some really good ones. But yeah, if there's no more questions, I'm probably gonna end my stream soon here in like 5. But like I said, to summarize everything, I recommend the book. I do 8 out of 10. I have it linked on here. I do 8 of 10. I only knocked it 2 points because I felt like some of the dialogue before the second to last chapter was kind of boring for me, and the chaos of meeting all the characters for me felt too chaotic for my brain. My brain couldn't comprehend some of the things that was happening. Always gotta get a group and do review after you finish reading a book. Seriously though, because like I read it and I was kind of like, oh yeah, that was like a good book. But now that I'm like talking to you guys, I'm like, wow, there was like all these things in there like I didn't catch. Hi, Agent X. Bye. Have a good night. You have a good night too. So I recommend the book. 8 out of 10. The end was just a little chaotic for me. But like I said, I didn't catch some of the things until now. I am looking forward to the second book. I also have to say this right before I like log off. It's a good read, but also a hard read for me personally because I don't read this genre. I don't read like adventure, magical genres of books. I do a lot of like fiction. I realize I like historical fiction. So I think that's why I like chapter 3 so much, because I love historical fiction. So I love like Janie Chang's book, like The Three Souls, The Bone Setter's Daughter. I love like A Thousand Splendid Suns. Like I like books like that. So I think that's why chapter 3 resonates with me so much, because that is the type of books I read always. Harry Potter was like one when I was like a kid, but like if I was an adult, I probably wouldn't have picked that up. But yeah, I really like historical books, especially about women. So I do like that the main character is a woman in here. But yeah, so like historical fiction that kind of is like a coming of age, that like you learn a lesson from it. Those are my favorite types of books. So I think that's why I like chapter 3 so much. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed my stream. I've been streaming for a long time, almost 2 hours, if you combine it with my first stream. So I'm gonna head out. I would love it if you guys check out the books. If any of you guys are interested, check out the book. Please do. It's a good read. And I love that, like if you're a Hmong and you just want to read a book written about you by someone who is like you, someone who looks like you, and you want something to relate to, like read this. This is really good. So that is my review for the Scrolling Indigo book, an extraordinary subject. So you guys have a good night. Thank you guys for joining my stream. I will see you guys on Monday. You guys know I do not stream Saturday and Sundays. So you guys have a good night. It's 10:43 p.m. where I live, so I will be going to bed. So you guys have a good night. I love you guys so much. Thank you guys for joining me for my first book review.